Hey everyone, it's Tobes, and welcome to your second monitor. Today is the next video in my series of March of the Machine Commander deck techs. I'm covering every legendary creature from the March of the Machine main set, in no particular order, plus the extra legends from Mom Jumpstart, the special pre-release promos, and, maybe if there is interest, the non-face legends from the Mom Commander product. So if you have a request for a March of the Machine Commander you'd like to see me build, that I haven't already built at this point, let me know in the comments below. As you see, today our commander is Slimefoot and Squee, respectively a clever Thallid, who is part of the new Weatherlight crew, and a formerly immortal Goblin, who served on the original Weatherlight. Squee has a storied history of traveling with Captain Sisay and Gerard Capuchin during the Weatherlight saga of novels, carrying his toy with him and gaining and losing immortality. Slimefoot, meanwhile, was introduced in a really delightful story for Dominaria 2018, in which it appears to gain its sentience from growing in proximity to the new Weatherlight's Power Stone core. This duo doesn't have lore for it since it's one of the special pre-release promos, but both of these are beloved characters from Magic's first plane, and I've been excited to build for them since I first began this series. But before we get into the deck tech, let's go over my deck building template. I like to build my decks around my commander. I want to show off why it's such a cool card and why I put it in the command zone. So, whatever it asks of me, I put about 30 cards toward doing that. That's our game plan. It's what we do at the table and how we try to win. You'll see today in this deck, that game plan is a little more complicated than just 30 cards of one type, but we'll see how that goes. 30 more cards go towards supporting that game plan in the form of card advantage, acceleration, and interaction pieces. I usually run 1 or 2 Wraths, sometimes more if it would play into my deck's game plan, sometimes none at all, but I almost always keep to my floor of 38 lands so I can make sure I always hit my land drops and I can cast my spells and, play the game. So let's talk about our team up commander. Slimefoot and Squee is a 3/3 legendary fungus goblin, a fungus and a goblin, for Jund mana, a black, a red, and a green. It says, whenever Slimefoot and Squee enters or attacks, we make a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. That's these little guys, maybe. And for 1 and Jund, if we sacrifice a Saproling, we can return Slimefoot and Squee and up to 1 other target creature card from our graveyard to the battlefield, but only at sorcery speed. So this card does a great job of combining the themes of the various Squee and Slimefoot cards together. Once it leaves the command zone for the first time, it's not going back unless it somehow gets exiled. Slimefoot and Squee doesn't fear the graveyard, for Squee's been dead countless times, and it has always come back. As long as we have a Saproling from which to regrow, we can dig up our commander and have them drag another body out of the dirt in the process. So we're a funny combination of a Reanimator deck and an Aristocrats deck. Just filling our yard with big creatures and cheating them into play isn't enough when we have 3 opponents, so getting in some chip damage whenever our creatures enter or die helps us spread the love around. But we do have big creatures to reanimate, and our reanimation spell lives in the command zone, even if it only ever goes back there briefly and against its will. The best part about Slimefoot and Squee is how we get them into the graveyard. Sure, we have sacrifice outlets that give us value for tossing our creatures into the bin, but our commander has a built-in method for changing zones. Combat. We're never afraid to attack with Slimefoot and Squee, since doing so usually results in it dying in the process of maybe doing some damage. And since it makes a Saproling whenever it attacks, this just gives us more tokens we can use to reanimate it later. And the fact that we get another Saproling when we reanimate it with a friend, replacing one of the ones we sacked, or the one we sacked to its ability, means our board is always littered with more little guys. From there, we have a pair of classic strategies. We ramp, we reanimate, and we swing in. We're in Jund colors, so we have plenty of removal to keep our opponent's boards in check. Once we get rolling, we're aggressive, trusting that our deck will provide as the game goes on. Since Slimefoot and Squee can bring our creatures back, we aren't shy about slamming in with them and forcing opponents to either protect their pieces or hang on to their life totals. And all the while, we're draining and burning our opponents out, eroding their resolve each time our commander climbs back out of its grave. Their hearts burn, but we've made the fear of death our weapon, and it's beyond anything they can throw at us. Let them struggle with whether or not they're afraid. We're at peace, gently reminding them that they can't kill us in a way that matters. You'll enjoy this deck if you like a resilient game plan with a faulty set of breaks, or if you like knowing that your funny little friends have friends of their own, and introducing them to your friends will be fun for everyone. So, as usual, this Moxfield list we're going over today is linked in the video's description. At the bottom of it, you will see a considering section filled with cards that I decided ultimately not to include in my deck. But if you have a bigger budget or a smaller one, if you have a different focus that you want to go with than the ones I chose, or if you want to lean more heavily into one of my foci, the considering section is a great place to get started and get some ideas when you build your own Slimefoot and Squee deck. So let's start, since we're talking about Reanimator, with our big hits. These are 20 cards that we want to get back out of the graveyard with our commander. We're going to start, all of these, of course, are mana value 5 or greater, and most of them have a pretty solid set of stats. Not all of them, but we'll talk about the Tendershoot Dryad. We're going to first start, though, with the High Society Hunter from Foundations. 3 and double black for a 5/3 Vampire Noble with flying that says whenever this creature attacks, we may sacrifice another creature. If we do, we put a +1/+1 counter on the High Society Hunter, and whenever another non-token creature dies, we draw a card. So this is a great card advantage engine for us. We want our creatures to die, and even though a lot of them are Saprolings, many of them are not. Like I mentioned, we want to slam in with all of our creatures, including our commander, and just let them die, and let our commander go to the graveyard. If we slam with the High Society Hunter, we don't have to let our creatures die in combat. We can just straight up sacrifice Slimefoot and Squee, or whatever we want, to the High Society Hunter, to make it a little bit bigger, and of course, trigger it. Very nice. Next up is Sir Conrad the Grim. Hard to do a black aristocrats like Drain theme without Sir Conrad from Throne of Eldraine. Love this guy. So for 3 and double black, we get a 5/4 legendary human knight that... Okay, so this ability says Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent when one of 3 things happens. The first is whenever another creature dies. Any creature on the battlefield, token, non-token, we can control it, someone else can control it, doesn't matter, it will make Sir Conrad deal a damage to each opponent. Or, if a creature is put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield. So if an opponent mills a creature, or discards a creature, or if we do, Sir Conrad will see that and deal 1 damage to each opponent. Last, if a creature leaves our graveyard, this only affects our graveyard, but if it leaves our graveyard because it's being exiled, because Slimefoot and Squee has died and we wanted them to go to the command zone from the graveyard, whatever reason it may be, something leaves our graveyard, or a creature's put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield, or if another creature dies, Sir Conrad deals 1 damage to each opponent. So this is going to stack up a lot of sweet triggers for us, especially if Slimefoot and Squee dies, Sir Conrad triggers, and then Slimefoot and Squee, we activate their last ability and bring them and another creature back. That's going to be 2 creatures leaving the battlefield, so Sir Conrad will trigger twice. Lots of great value from this friend. In addition, if that wasn't enough, we can pay 1 and a black and have each player mill a card, which doesn't just put a card in our graveyard, it also puts a card in everyone's graveyard, and if any of those cards were creatures, it triggers Sir Conrad's second clause of his first ability, and he gets to do a damage to each opponent. Lots of great there for Sir Conrad. He also has a little bit of a reputation at commander tables, which means he's a bit of a removal magnet. And what happens when he gets removed? That means not only are our opponents not using removal spells on something else of ours that we might rather keep, but also, generally, it kills him, so it puts him in the graveyard, which doesn't, of course, trigger him, because it's another creature, but it does get him exactly where we need him to be for us to bring him back with Slimefoot and Squee. Next up, the aforementioned Tendershoot Dryad. For 4 and a green, we get a 2/2 Dryad with Ascend, which means, while the Dryad is in play, if we control 10 or more permanents at any moment, we get the City's Blessing, and we have that for the rest of the game, even if we drop down below 10 or more permanents. Once we get the City's Blessing, we always have it. It doesn't do anything on its own, but the Dryad cares about it. So as long as we have 10 or more permanents, including our lands and our tokens and what have you, we get the City's Blessing, and we have Ascended, and things are great. The Dryad says at the beginning of each upkeep, we make a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. That does not say the beginning of each of our upkeeps. This happens on every player's turn. So in a 4-player commander game, we're starting our turns with 4 new Saprolings, 1 for the turn that we're just beginning, and 1 for each turn that's passed of our opponents. So lots of great ways for us to keep Saprolings in play, which is the big sort of vulnerability of our commander. If we get board wiped, it seems like we might be able to bring our commander right back, But that means all of our Saprolings died too, so we can't get our commander back from the graveyard. That's probably the only time we really want to put Slimefoot and Squee back in the command zone, other than like exile removal. So we have ways to make more Saprolings, like the Tendershoot Dryad, which additionally gives all of our Saprolings +2/+2 as long as we have the City's Blessing. So once we have the City's Blessing, all of our Saprolings are now 3/3s, including the ones, of course, that are made from other sources besides the Dryad, like Slimefoot and Squee. And so this is a great card for us to bring back as it pumps a sort of half of our board and just keeps putting 3/3s into play every upkeep. Next up, we have the Combustible Gearhulk. I love this card. 6/6, 4 and double red for a 6/6 artifact creature construct with first strike. And when it enters, target opponent may have us draw 3 cards. If they don't, we mill 3 cards, and then this deals damage to that player equal to the total mana value of those cards. Since we are currently in our big hit section, you can see we've got 20 cards in the deck that are at least mana value 5. So a pretty good chance of getting quite a bit of damage to our opponents if they don't want us to just get a free Ancestral Recall on top of a 6/6 first striker. It additionally puts those cards in our graveyard, which is where we want them so we can get them back out with Slimefoot and Squee. Next up, we have the Dreadhound. This is sort of a lesser version of Sir Conrad, but still puts in a lot of work. So this is a 6/6 Demon Dog for 4 and double black that makes us mill 3 cards when it first enters. So again, we're milling 3. That lets us put creatures in our graveyard. Hopefully triggers Sir Conrad, but also triggers the Dreadhound itself, because whenever a creature dies or a creature card is put into a graveyard from a library, each opponent loses 1 life. So this isn't damage, it's loss of life, maybe a little bit better, and it sort of triggers similarly to the first 2 things that Sir Conrad does, but technically only this part is what Sir Conrad does. A creature is put into a graveyard from a library. Sir Conrad cares about the creature cards being put into a graveyard from anywhere other than the battlefield for the second part, but Dreadhound counts itself when it dies. Sir Conrad only counts other creatures when they die. So again, 1 more mana, not all of the different ways that Sir Conrad hurts people, but it comes with a free mill 3 and a bigger body. Love the Dreadhound. Next up is Flayer of the Hatebound. 5 and a red for a 4/2 Devil with Undying, meaning when it dies, if it didn't have any +1/+1 counters on it, we bring it back into play under its owner's control with a +1/+1 counter on it. So that means, of course, if it dies again, it died with a +1/+1 counter, so it'll just stay dead. However, whenever this creature or another creature enter from our graveyard, the creature deals damage equal to its power to any target. So that means the Flayer of the Hatebound is a 4/2. When it dies, it comes back as a 5/3 and does 5 damage to any target. That's some solid removal or just straight burn to our opponents. It also means whenever we bring it back with Slimefoot and Squee, it's going to do damage based on its power and on Slimefoot and Squee's power. Or we bring anything else back while this is in play, the same is true for them too. So Flayer of the Hatebound is a great sort of Warstorm surge for us whenever we bring things back from the graveyard, just burning things all over the place. Next up, we have Kogla and Yadaro. I wanted to put original Kogla in this, but I thought this was actually more fun. And also, if you like this card, feel free to check out the playlist linked in this video's description and see how I built a deck with this as the commander. So for 2 double red and double green, we get a 7/7 legendary ape dinosaur turtle. This is the ape and this is the dinosaur turtle. And it says whenever Kogla and Yadaro enters, choose 1. It gains trample and haste until end of turn, or it fights target creature we don't control. So either it's a hasty 7/7 trampler, or it's a removal spell. We just kill something. It also has the ability for us to pay 2, a red and a green, and discard it to destroy up to 1 target artifact or an enchantment. Then we shuffle Kogla and Yadaro into our library from our graveyard and draw a card. So this is sort of us cycling it. We're activating it from our graveyard, or from our hand rather, discarding it and drawing a card, but in the process, it's getting shuffled back into our library and we get to naturalize something. So it's removal for us in multiple different ways. And it maybe draws us a card. Pretty fun. Something to note about this ability here is this. Discarding it to our graveyard is part of the cost, which just puts this ability on the stack. When the ability resolves, that's when we will destroy an artifact or an enchantment, shuffle Kogla and Yadaro into our library, and draw. If Kogla and Yidaro are not in our graveyard, all of the rest of this still happens. We still destroy an artifact or enchantment, and we still draw a card. But why wouldn't they be in our graveyard? Well, because what if we've reanimated them in the process? Now, we can't do that with Slimefoot and Squee because their ability activates only as a sorcery. But what if there's a different way for us to do it? What if there's something else for us to do with our cards that care about our creatures in the graveyard? Just worth noting, if there's a way to intervene in this, we get all the value of it and maybe get Kogla and Yidaro back from it. Next up is Massacre Worm, just a classic. This is our one Wrath in the deck. Not a very strong Wrath, but we've got a lot of big creatures and we don't mind our stuff dying. So 3 and triple black for a 6/5 Phyrexian Worm that when it enters, creatures our opponents control get -2/-2 until end of turn. So everything, toughness of 2 or less dies, and anything that's got damage marked on it already, maybe from an attack we already made, will die as well. Assuming, that kills it. It also says whenever a creature an opponent controls dies, that player loses 2 life. So it could be tokens, it can be anything. So this is a great way for us to sneak in post-combat and really make our opponents sad. Plus, we get to bring this back with our commander and get a sudden wrath that maybe they're not expecting. Next up is Trumpeting Carnosaur. 4 and double red for a 7/6 dinosaur with trample. And when it enters, we discover 5. Discover means we exile cards from the top of our library until we find a spell of a non-land, I should say, of mana value 5 or less. We can then cast that spell without paying its mana cost, or we can put it in our hand. And then every other card we exiled, we put on the bottom of our library in, I believe, a random order. Trumpeting Carnosaur gets us a free spell whenever it comes in. And then we also have the ability, while it's in our hand, to pay 2 and a red and discard it to deal 3 damage to target creature or planeswalker. This is a removal spell that puts it in our graveyard so that we can bring it back with Slimefoot and Squee. Why pay 6 mana if we can just entomb it, essentially, discard it really, and bring it back for 4 mana plus getting the Discover from it either way. So we can hardcast it or we can reanimate it. Great to have something that puts itself in our graveyard. Next up is Vein Ripper. I like this card. 3 and triple black for a 6/5 Vampire Assassin with flying and ward sacrifice a creature. That means if our opponents target Vein Ripper with a spell or an ability, they have to sacrifice a creature or that spell or ability gets countered. Pretty sweet. In addition, whenever a creature dies, target opponent loses 2 life, and we gain 2 life, including when they sacrifice a creature to the ward, because the ward ability is a trigger. So they have to resolve that trigger first, which will trigger this, even if they've paid the sacrifice cost to kill the Vein Ripper. And we've got lots of things dying. And this is also whenever a creature dies, not just our creatures, not just our opponent's creatures, all the creatures. So any deaths happening, which there will be in our Jund deck, we're going to be able to drain an opponent for 2. Next up we have Ziatora the Incinerator. This was my promo rare for the Streets of New Capenna pre-release in my Jund kit, so I did pretty well. For 3, a black, a red, and a green, we get a 6/6 legendary demon dragon with flying that says at the beginning of our end step, we may sacrifice another creature, so a good sack outlet. When we do, Ziatora deals damage equal to that creature's power to any target, and we create 3 treasure tokens. So essentially, this is a fling effect. We sack a creature, and Ziatora does damage equal to its power. So that's good removal, it's good burn, and we get rewarded with 3 treasures in the process. Seems good. Plus 6/6 Flying Dragon. Next up, from the recent Lorwyn Eclipsed set, we have Aurora Awakener. This is a 7/7 Giant Druid for 6 and a green. It has Trample and a Vivid ability. When it enters, we reveal cards from the top of our library until we reveal X permanents, where X is the number of colors among permanents we control. Hopefully, when we're casting this, or reanimating it, we have a black creature and a red creature, or a black permanent and a red permanent in play, so that Aurora Awakener sees all 3 of our colors, since it itself is green. I want to remind players, if you're new, lands are colorless. It doesn't matter what color they produce, they themselves are a colorless permanent. So we want to make sure we are not cheating on this. Anyway, once we reveal that many cards, we put any number of those permanents onto the battlefield, and the rest on the bottom of our library in the random order. The rest of the revealed cards, that is. So we just get to not exactly draw 3 permanents, hopefully, but just put them straight into play. That's pretty sweet. On top of a 7/7 trampling body. Now, do we want to pay 7 for this? It's not actually terrible to do so. But if we can get this in the graveyard and bring it back with Slimefoot and Squee, that's what it's here for. Next up is Butcher of Malakir. Love this card. 5 and double black for a 5/4 flying vampire warrior that says whenever this creature or another creature we control dies, each opponent sacrifices a creature of their choice. This is Grave Pact on a body, but as opposed to Grave Pact, this is a 40-cent card, so it's also 3 more mana than Grave Pact. So yeah, Butcher of Malakir is a great way for us to have our opponents cause things to die, which, as you've seen, triggers some of our other cards, and gives us the ability to swing in since those creatures aren't around to block anymore, or, aren't around to attack us anymore. We don't get to choose what they sacrifice, but still pretty good in a deck where we don't care if our creatures die because we can just bring them back, including the Butcher itself. Next up is Glacier Godmaw from Edge of Eternities. I just think this is a cool card. 5 and double green for a 6/6 Leviathan with trample, and when it enters, we make a Lander token. Lander tokens are Wayfarer's Baubles. They're an artifact with pay 2, tap, and sacrifice it to Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. Pretty sweet. The Godmaw also has a landfall trigger. Whenever a land we control enters, creatures we control, including the Godmaw itself, get +1/+1 and gain vigilance and haste until end of turn. So a great reason for us to play our lands post-combat or post when we bring something back with Slimefoot and Squee, because then those things will have just entered, they'll have summoning sickness, but the Godmaw gives them haste, +1 and +1 and vigilance. Pretty nice. Next up is another classic. It's Palaka Worm. 4 and triple green for a 7/7 trampling worm with when this creature enters, we gain 7 life, and when it dies, we draw a card. Love this thing. Everyone enjoys Palaka Worm. Speaking of big worms, it's the Phyrexian Fleshgorger. This is a prototype creature. We have 2 of these in the deck. So for 7 generic mana, we get a 7/5 Menace lifelink artifact creature Phyrexian Worm with a ward cost of pay life equal to this creature's power. So in order for our opponents to target this with a spell or ability, they're going to get a triggered ability that says they have to pay 7 life. If they're willing to pay 7 life on top of killing this, sure, it's like we got a free attack with it. However, this also has prototype for 1 and double black, which means we can cast this for 7 generic mana and we'll get a 7/5. Or we can cast this for 1 and double black and we'll get a 3/3. Either way, it still has menace and lifelink and a ward cost based on its power. It just has a smaller power if we pay the prototype cost. So the way we want to play with this is we want to sort of cheat this into play in a way. We're still casting it legitimately, but we want to prototype this. We want to get a 3/3 menace lifelink with ward by paying 1 and double black. When we do that, we just attack with it, or I guess block with it, but it's got menace. We might as well attack and gain a little life in the process. And once our opponents kill it, we bring it back with Slimefoot and Squee, and it has no memory that we prototyped it before. It will come back as its normal form, which is a 7/5 menace lifelink with that big ward cost. So that's what we want to do with this big monster of a prototype creature. Next up is Colossal Grave Reaver. This is 6, a black and a green, so pretty expensive, for a 7/6 flying dragon that says whenever it enters or attacks, we mill 3 cards. Lots of great ways for us to get cards in our graveyard that we can probably bring back. And whenever 1 or more creatures are put into our graveyard from our library, put 1 of them onto the battlefield. So the Grave Reaver doesn't even need us to wait for Slimefoot and Squee to take its gruesome journey to the graveyard and back, bringing a friend with it. We can just, if we mill 3 cards and they're all creatures, we get to put 1 of them directly onto the battlefield just from this triggered ability. If we mill 3 cards from some other effect, because it's not once per turn, it's just once per time creatures get put into our graveyard from our library. We have other ways to mill ourselves. Colossal Grave Reaver is going to help us get our creatures from those milled cards directly into play, plus being a 7/6 flyer. Next up is Verdant Force. 5 and triple green for a 7/7 elemental with no other abilities other than, at the beginning of each upkeep, make a 1/1 green Saproling creature token. This is another Saproling maker for us. It's not as good as our Tindershoot Dryad because it costs so much more, but it does have a bigger body. And it still works on each opponent's upkeep as well as our own. Next we have Apex Altasaur, a 9-mana green 10/10 dinosaur that when it enters, it fights up to one target creature we don't control. That says up to, so we don't have to have it fight anyone, but we want it to fight someone. Because when it does, hopefully it kills them since it's a 10/10, and it has Enrage. Whenever it's dealt damage, it fights up to one target creature we don't control. So that means this comes in, fights, let's say a 2/2. Now it's got 2 damage marked on it, and it is enraged, which means it gets to fight something else, if we want it to. We just have this fight as many things at the table as it can without dying, assuming we don't want it to die right away. We might want to. Even if this only takes out one big scary thing, that's enough. But it comes in and fights one thing, and then keeps fighting until we're done with it. And we want it to stop fighting. We can just have it as a 10/10 then, have it as a blocker, get ready to attack with it, because if we attack with it, when it gets dealt damage from that attack, or from being blocked I should say, it gets enraged and it starts fighting things again in the middle of combat, which may kill it, and that's fine. If it dies, we bring it back with Slimefoot and Squee, it re-enters, and the fight begins again. Apex Altasaur is belligerent. Last in this section is another one of our prototype creatures. This is Rust Goliath. 10 generic mana for a 10/10 with Reach and Trample. Pretty good. But we can also prototype it for 3 and double green to get a 3/5 Reach Trampler. So again, we pay the 5, we get a 3/5 Reach Trample, we let it die, and we bring it back as a 10/10 with our commander. That covers our big hits. But how do we get these into the graveyard? We have 10 sacrifice outlets. One of which is not a real sacrifice outlet, but it is great in this deck, and we might be able to use it that way. It's Skullclamp. For a single generic mana, we get an equipment that equips for 1 and gives the equipped creature +1/-1. But Tobes, I know you're thinking, well, what happens if we equip this to a Saproling? It's going to become a 2/0 and die immediately. Well, that's kind of the point, because whenever the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. So we want to put the Skullclamp on something that is either going to die, like a creature we plan to attack with, like the Berigelant Brontodon. The Apex Altasaur is what it's called. We put this on the Altasaur, it becomes an 11/9. We have it fight its way around and just die. Or we put this on a Saproling, and the Saproling just dies immediately. Whenever the equipped creature dies, we're going to draw 2 cards, which is a much better replacement for the creatures, especially since we can get those creatures back, even the Saprolings, since Slimefoot and Squee makes one when they enter, even from the graveyard. So Skullclamp is a great engine for us to get card advantage in this deck that makes an awful lot of 1/1s. Every time we attack with our commander, it makes one. And also has a lot of creatures dying. So yeah, we just pump up their power a little bit at the cost of a little bit of their toughness, and get a reward when they die from it. Next up is an actual sacrifice outlet. It's Deadly Dispute. 1 and a black for an instant that says, as an additional cost, we sacrifice an artifact or creature, and we draw 2 cards and make a treasure. So a little bit of ramp, a little bit of card draw, gives us a way to put something in the graveyard, even our commander, so we can bring things back, and we can even use that treasure to bring our commander back if we are a little light on mana. Next up is Nasty End from Lord of the Rings, the original Lord of the Rings set. For 1 and a black, we get an instant with an additional cost, so sacrifice a creature, and it just has us draw 2 cards. But if the sacrificed creature was legendary, we draw 3 cards instead. So we can turn our commander into 3 cards, which is pretty good. Alright, now we've got White of the Reliquary. A black and a green for a 2/2 zombie knight with vigilance that gets +1/+1 for each creature card in our graveyard. So over the course of this game, this is going to sort of ebb and flow. It's going to be a bigger creature, then we'll reanimate some things and it'll be a smaller creature. That's fine. 2/2 vigilance is all we need from her, because we can tap her and sacrifice another creature to search our library for a land card, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. It does not say a basic land card. We can get any land in our graveyard and put it right into play by just sacrificing a creature, which is one of the things we're going to want to do anyway. Maybe we want to get a new enters trigger from one of our creatures, so we put it in the graveyard, and then the next turn we do the same thing with Slimefoot and Squee, and get them both back, using the mana from the lands we found in the process. Great engine for us here. Next is Braid's Arisen Nightmare. 1 and double black for a 3/3 legendary nightmare that says at the beginning of your end step, you may sacrifice a permanent, basically, an artifact, creature, enchantment, land, or planeswalker. It doesn't work for battles. Is there something we're missing here? I'm sure there is. Let me know in the comments what I've missed in terms of permanents that generally see play that aren't these. If you do, each opponent may sacrifice a permanent of their choice that shares a card type with it. So if we sacrifice a creature, our opponents are going to have to sacrifice creatures. If we sacrifice an artifact, they might sacrifice a creature anyway if it's an artifact creature. It just has to be an artifact. But if they don't, for each opponent who doesn't, they lose 2 life and we draw a card. So Braids either gets things off our opponent's field or has them lose life and draws us cards. We might draw 3 cards at our end step from this. Thanks, Braids. You're weird. Next up, we have Eldritch Evolution. Really fun in this deck. 1 and double green for a sorcery with an additional cost to sacrifice a creature. It lets us search our library for a creature card with mana value X or less, where X is 2, plus the sacrificed creature's mana value. We put that card on the battlefield, shuffle, and exile Eldritch Evolution. So the idea behind this is, usually what I suggest is you have a deck list, or just a list of your creatures in the deck arranged by mana value. Have it on your phone, have it on a little printout, whatever you need when you play this deck, so that you know what you can get. Sacrificing a Saproling lets you find a 1 or a 2 drop, since you can find a creature with mana value X or less, X being 2 higher than the creature's mana value. If you sacrifice Slimefoot and Squee, you're going to be able to find a 5 drop. If you sacrifice, the Apex Allosaur, you can get any card in your deck, any creature in your deck. So yeah, Eldritch Evolution, it's only a one-time thing, but it's pretty fun, being able to find exactly what you're looking for and put something else in the graveyard that you can bring back with your commander. Next up is Victimize. Love this card. 2 and a black for a sorcery that says choose 2 target creature cards in your graveyard, which means you cannot cast Victimize without having 2 creature cards in your graveyard because you can't otherwise target them. That's important. Have to have at least 2 creature cards in your graveyard, and you have to choose them first. Then you sacrifice a creature, and if you do, you return the chosen cards to the battlefield tapped. That means you cannot sacrifice a creature and then return it and another card to from the graveyard to the battlefield. You have to have 2 creature cards in your graveyard and then sacrifice a 3rd creature that's already in play. That's how Victimize works. No way around it, but that's fine. It's pretty great. It's putting 1 thing in your graveyard, maybe your commander, and getting 2 things back. Then you activate your commander and bring back a 3rd thing with your commander and get a Saproling in the process. Seems great. Next we have Rise of the Witch King from Lord of the Rings. 2, a black and a green for a sorcery that says each player sacrifices a creature of their choice. That includes us, so this is a sack outlet. If we sacrificed a creature this way, we will, don't worry. We may return another permanent from our graveyard to the battlefield. Notice, this is a permanent card. We don't have to get another creature. We can get back an enchantment, we can get back a land if we've got a land that's gone to the graveyard, whatever we may need. We've got plenty of ways to mill in our deck ourselves, so we might be able to get out a big creature, but we might want to just, get ourselves a land, get ourselves an artifact. Maybe our Soul Ring's in the graveyard and we want it back. We can sacrifice a Saproling for that, or even just our commander, so we can activate our commander from the graveyard from there. Pretty good. And we've seen our last 2. High Society Hunter lets us sacrifice another creature to put a counter on it when the hunter attacks, and Zeatora at our insta lets us sacrifice a creature to make 3 treasures and fling that creature at any target. So those are our outlets. Those are ways for us to sacrifice our permanents, essentially, and get them into the graveyard. But what other ways do we have to get things into the graveyard? This is our graveyard section. We start with a classic, especially for Jund. It is Faithless Looting. A single red for a sorcery that lets us draw 2 cards and discard 2 cards. So they don't have to be the same ones, obviously. We want to draw 2 cards and then put the best reanimation targets we have into the graveyard. We can also flash back Faithless Looting from our graveyard for 2 and a red, meaning we cast it for 2 and a red from our graveyard and then we exile it as it resolves. So yeah, a good way for us to put things in our graveyard. I know Mark Rosewater says this card is a mistake, and I believe that it should be. Red should rummage rather than loot, but this is still very good for us, and I know not everyone loves this Strixhaven Mystical Archive printing. I think it's awesome, so please enjoy. Next we have Stitcher Supplier. A single black for a 1/1 zombie. When it enters or dies, we mill 3 cards. That's all it takes. Just very powerful card that puts cards in our graveyard when we have it enter and when we have it die. So it's a great choice for us to sacrifice to our other effects. Bitter Triumph is next. 1 and a black for an instant that says, as an additional cost to cast a spell, discard a card or pay 3 life and destroy target creature or planeswalker. So we can just make this sort of Infernal Grasp for 1 more life and hit planeswalkers with it. But what we want to do is discard something. We want to put cards in our graveyard so that we can reanimate them. So Bitter Triumph gives us the ability to essentially move a card from our hand to our second hand, which is our graveyard, in the process of killing something. Pretty good for us. It's like a 2-for-1 in a way. Fauna Shaman is next. This is 1 and a green for a 2/2 Elf Shaman with the ability pay a green and tap it and discard a creature card to search our library for a creature card, reveal it, put it in our hand, and shuffle. Again, we're just moving our creatures around. One of the ones we want to reanimate goes to our graveyard. One of the ones we want to put in our hand, either to cast or to discard next turn, goes from our library to our hand. We get to find exactly the thing we need. Pretty good. Life from the Loam is next. If you like Dredge, you are degenerate, but that is fine because we're running it too. For 1 and a green, we have a sorcery that says return up to 3 target land cards from our graveyard to our hand. An excellent way for us to get our lands back from all the milling we've done with them. And it has Dredge 3. Dredge is a weird mechanic. It says it replaces a draw, any draw, even the first draw of our turn. If we would draw a card while Life from the Loam is in the graveyard, instead we can mill 3 cards and put Life from the Loam from our graveyard into our hand. So in a way, it's sort of like, would you like to draw a card from your library, or would you like to draw Life from the Loam, quote unquote, draw Life from the Loam from the graveyard? If the latter, just mill 3 cards. So this is a great way for us to put more and more cards in our graveyard, and if we put a bunch of lands in our graveyard, we just cast Life from the Loam and get them back into our hand. Very nice. Twilight Diviner from Lorwyn Eclipsed is next. This card is so cool. 2 and a black for a 3/3 Elf Cleric that surveils 2 when it enters. And then, whenever 1 or more creatures we control enter, if they entered or were cast from a graveyard, we make a token that's a copy of 1 of them. This ability triggers only once each time. So oftentimes, if you look at this, you're like, oh, I want to create a token that's a copy of all of them. Well, Slimefoot and Squee is legendary, so we don't mind not getting a second copy of it. We want to make a second Stitcher Supplier, or a second Ravenous Chupacabra, which you'll see that we have in here as well. Even a second Twilight Diviner would be great. Make a copy of it. I wish we could do that because it says other creatures, unfortunately. But, you know, getting an extra Fauna Shaman or a Combustible Gearhulk, pretty good ideas with the Twilight Diviner. And this works when this is, when this comes back. If we were to bring the Twilight Diviner back itself from the graveyard, we could make a second Slimefoot and Squee. You know, we would have to legend rule away one of them, probably the token, but maybe not the token. Maybe we want to put the original back in the graveyard so we can reanimate something else. And since both of them did enter the battlefield, both of them do make a Saproling for us. So now we've got a Slimefoot and Squee in play that whenever it attacks makes a Saproling. We've got 2 Saprolings in play, and our commander's back in our graveyard, ready to do the reanimate thing with a different creature. And we can have that different creature make a copy, or we can get a copy of that different creature thanks to Twilight Diviner when Slimefoot and Squee brings it back. So interesting play patterns all over the place here. Big Score is next. 3 and a red for an instant with the additional cost of us discarding a card, putting things in our graveyard. Has us draw 2 cards and make 2 treasures. This is sort of the Big Daddy version of our sacrifice outlet, Deadly Dispute, that we saw. So Deadly Dispute has us sacrifice a creature. Big Score just lets us discard any card. And this makes us 2 treasures and has us draw 2 cards. So yeah. Combustible Gearhulk, we've seen. It's possible that whatever target opponent that they may choose to have us mill 3. So yeah. Dreadhound has us mill 3 when it enters the battlefield. Kogla and Yadaro, as I mentioned, can put itself in our graveyard. Again, we're not usually going to use that, but since it shuffles back in, but it is a thing that we're doing if we care about things going to the graveyard, like, for example, Sir Conrad. There you go. Trumpet and Carnosaur, we can channel it, essentially, pay 2 and a red and discard it to have it deal 3 damage to a target creature or planeswalker. So that's a good way for us to get it back from the graveyard. And again, Colossal Grave Reaper, whenever it enters or attacks, has us mill 3 cards. Good ways to fill our yard. One last section that I want to think of in terms of our game plan is our Drain and Burn section. We've got 12 cards here that do direct damage or life loss to our opponents. So Impact Tremors is an easy one. This is 1 and a red for an enchantment. Whenever a creature we control enters, Impact Tremors does 1 damage to each opponent. Perfect. Hits every opponent, works for our commander, who comes in, triggers Impact Tremors, triggers itself, makes a Saproling, which itself triggers Impact Tremors. So our commander comes in, and that's just 2 damage to everyone. If our commander came in by bringing something back from the graveyard, that's 3 damage to everyone. That's a free lightning bolt to each of our opponents, just from reanimating a creature with our commander. So Impact Tremors really adds up over the course of the game, and it's only 2 mana. So having an opponent spend a disenchant to kill Impact Tremors is a great use of their removal for us, because they're not using it on something more powerful of ours. Braids, of course, if our opponents choose not to sacrifice a permanent, then they will lose 2 life, plus we'll draw a card. Weftstalker Ardent is next. This is a copy of a combination of Impact Tremors and Reckless Fireweaver. For 2 and a red, we get a 2/3 Drix Artificer from Edge of Eternities that says whenever another creature or artifact we control enters, Weftstalker Ardent deals 1 damage to each opponent. Great. Just like Impact Tremors, but it costs 1 more, has a body, and triggers on artifacts as well. We can also warp it in for a single red. What that means is, instead of casting it for 2 and a red, we cast it for a single red, it enters as normal, and we get to have it that turn, and then at our end step, we exile it, and on a later turn, we can cast it for its regular cost from exile. So why would we do that? It's only 3 mana. Well, maybe we want to have a bunch of creatures enter, and we only have 1 red mana left over. We can't actually cast the Ardent, but we can warp it in, get a little bit of value from it, and now it's in exile, and we can cast it again later. Pretty good. It's also worth noting, it only triggers on other creatures. Artifacts, but other creatures. Worth remembering, because if we bring this back with Slimefoot and Squee, it's going to trigger when it enters, because it sees Slimefoot and Squee enter, and then trigger again when Slimefoot and Squee makes that Saproling. It just won't trigger on itself. Next up we have Garna, Bloodfist of Keld, 1 black and double red for a 4/3 legendary human berserker, originally from Dominaria United, this printing, but I've got the Foundations printing here because Foundations is great. It says whenever another creature we control dies, draw a card if it was attacking, otherwise Garna deals 1 damage to each opponent. So anytime our creatures die, we either draw cards off of them or Garna burns each opponent for 1. Pretty sweet. We've got Grave Venerations next. This is a Blood Artist on an enchantment from Lorwyn Eclipsed Commander. For 3 and a black, we get an enchantment that says when it enters, we become the Monarch. The Monarch is a great rule in Commander. There's only 2 things to know about it. The way it works is, whoever is the Monarch, so when this enters, you become the Monarch. At your end step, you draw a card. You just get a Monarch trigger. At your end step, you get a free card draw. And whenever any player deals combat damage to the Monarch, the player who dealt the damage becomes the Monarch. So the Monarchy passes around the table as people attack each other because it's only combat damage, and the Monarchy moves around. Why would you want the Monarchy? Because it draws you a free card at your end step. That's the only other thing it does. Great way to keep the game moving. Love the Monarchy. So Grave Veneration just makes you the Monarch, and at the beginning of your end step, if you're the Monarch, you return up to 1 target creature card from your graveyard to your hand. You get a free regrowth for a creature. Pretty good. Bring stuff back. Maybe even if you have Slimefoot and Squee in your graveyard and you don't want to, maybe you don't have any other creatures in there and you just want to recast it, sure. Just beginning of your end step, put it back in your hand, and you're able to cast it next turn for its casting cost rather than casting cost +1, which is of course the cost of its last ability. Finally, whenever a creature you control dies, each opponent loses a life and you gain a life. So straight up Blood Artist trigger, except that it's each opponent. Pretty good. We've seen Sir Conrad. Sir Conrad does a damage to each opponent in lots of different ways. Combustible Gearhulk, if an opponent chooses not to have a straw 3, they're probably going to be taking a bunch of burn damage. Dreadhound rather, has opponents lose life whenever our creatures die, or any creatures die rather, or creatures are put from a graveyard into a graveyard from the library. Flater of the Hatebound cares when it or other creatures enter the battlefield from our graveyard, and thereby, burns any target, including other players, equal to the creature who entered from the graveyard's power. Massacre Worm has opponents lose life when any of their creatures die. Vein Ripper, when any creatures at all die, one of our opponents loses 2 and we gain 2. And Zeatora flings something. So that's straight up damage to any target, but it could be burn rather than just removal. Pretty good. So that covers all of our cards that I think of as the core of our game plan. I want to talk about the cards that supplement our game plan, but first let's talk about the ways that we can support it, starting with our card advantage section. As usual, I've used the word draw here just to be a shorthand for card advantage. It doesn't mean these are actually all the draw a card action. Just ways for us to see more cards and use them. So Skull Clamp, as we see, whenever the equipped creature dies, we draw 2 cards. Deadly Dispute lets us sack a creature, but we get to draw 2 cards and make a treasure from it. I know that's not technically card advantage, but it works for us if what we sacrificed was a token or something. Anyway, you get it. Fauna Shaman has us discard a creature card to tutor for a creature card into our hand, which is great because our graveyard is essentially another hand. Hunter's Talent is next. This is 1 and a green for a class enchantment. The way this works is when it comes in, we get the first ability right away, which is when it enters, target creature we control deals damage equal to its power to target creature we don't control. That's just a bite effect. We get to remove something. Then at sorcery speed, we can level it up to level 2 for 1 and a green, and it gets the second ability. Whenever we attack, target attacking creature gets +1/+0 and gains trample until end of turn. Very nice. Once it is level 2, at sorcery speed, we can pay 3 and a green to level it up to level 3, and it will have all of these abilities. So as it levels up, it gains new abilities, even though that first one is just sort of a one-shot. The last ability is the reason it's in this section, because at the beginning of our end step, if we control a creature with power 4 or greater, and we've got quite a few of those, we draw a card. So even in our big hits section, that's, I think all of them except for the Tindershoot Dryad have power 4 or greater, but we have cards like Garna, which is a 4/3 that isn't in that section, so it also counts. So this is a great way for us to get repeatable card advantage from just having big creatures every end step. Idol of Oblivion is next in this deck, in this section. For 2 generic mana, we get an artifact that we can tap to draw a card, but only if we created a token this turn. This is every turn. Either Slimefoot and Squee entered, or it attacked. So we made a Saproling, and after that happens, we just draw a card. A free extra card basically every turn with Idol of Oblivion sounds great to me. We also have the ability, which we're probably not going to use, but we sure could, to pay 8, tap, and sack the idol to make a colorless 10/10 Eldrazi creature token. That is very big. It's not as great as some of the creatures we have in our deck, and it's definitely not as great as being able to get a free card every turn, but we have the option, and we can do it at instant speed, and that seems pretty cool. Nasty End, as we've seen, lets us sack a creature to draw 2, but if the sacrificed creature was legendary, like Slimefoot and Squee, we draw 3 instead. Braids might draw us cards and cause players to lose life if they're not willing to sacrifice a permanent of the same type of the one we sacrificed. Eldritch Evolution lets us sacrifice a creature, but then tutor for another creature and put it directly on the battlefield, with the new creature's mana value being at most 2 more than the one we sacrificed. Garruk's Uprising is next. This is 2 and a green for an enchantment with 3 abilities. It gives all of our creatures trample. That's pretty good. We've got a bunch of big creatures, not all of them have trample, we want to have it. And it cares about ferocious creatures, which is to say creatures with power 4 or greater. When it enters, if we have a power 4 or greater creature, we draw a card. And while it's in play, whenever one of those creatures enters, we draw a card. So this is a lot of repeatable removal for us, or repeatable draw, I should say. when we have our big creatures enter. Oftentimes, that's going to be from the graveyard with Slimefoot and Squee. But being able to have our creatures all have trample as well is also pretty good. Next up, we're running Phyrexian Arena. 1 and double black for an enchantment that at the beginning of our upkeep causes us to draw a card and lose a life. We don't need the life, we're playing Jund, we want the extra card. Drawing twice as many cards every turn is worth 1 life, so much. What a sad moment in the story, but great card. We see the big score, lets us draw 2 and make 2 treasures when we cast it. Garna can have us draw a card if one of our creatures dies, assuming it was attacking. Grave Venerations draws us a card at least once because it makes us the Monarch, and hopefully draws us more cards as we continue to be the Monarch. Next we have Nimata Primeval Warden. This card from Dominaria United is rough. I never like facing this card. 2, a black and a green for a 3/4 legendary Treeful with reach that says if a creature an opponent controls would die, exile it instead. This is Leyline of the Void. This shuts down all of our opponents' graveyard strategies with their creatures. Those creatures are not coming back. And when we do that, we make a Saproling. We don't just get to exile things. We care about our opponent's creatures dying so that they turn into our Saprolings and they never come home. Amazing. We can also pay a green and sacrifice a Saproling to give Nimata +2/+2 until end of turn, which doesn't seem like it's that big of a deal, but with a couple of green mana and a few Saprolings, we can have a very big reach blocker out of nowhere. And for 1 and a black and sacrifice 2 Saprolings, we can draw a card. Usually our Saprolings are a little bit more valuable to us than that, but sometimes there are definitely board states in this deck where we can end up with Saprolings littering the board, so it's worth it to cash them in if we really need card advantage. Next up we have a sad robot. It's the Solemn Simulacrum. 4 generic mana for a 2/2 artifact creature golem that when it enters, we Rampant Growth. Search our library for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. And when it dies, we can draw a card. Great! So we want it to do both. We want it to constantly enter and die and enter and die. We bring it back with our commander. We get the additional ramp effect. We have it die again. We draw another card. Great. Love the sad robot. High Society Hunter draws us a card whenever another non-token creature dies. Doesn't even say ones that we control. Very nice. Combustible Gearhulk might, if the opponent we choose doesn't want to take a bunch of damage when we mill 3 cards, it might just come with an Ancestral Recall. Kogla and Yadaro can draw us a card if we pay the 2 a red and a green to discard it and blow up a target artifact or enchantment. Trumpeting Carnosaur discovers for us, so it gets us a free spell, either into our hand or into play rather. Aurora Awakener lets us put at least 1 permanent into play because it's going to be green when it enters, hopefully 3. And finally, Pelaka Worm, when it dies, we draw a card. So taking a little bit after our sad robot there, Pelaka Worm, think about that. All right, that's our card advantage section. Let's take a look at our acceleration, which again, I've just shorthanded with this ramp tag. We're running the Ignoble Hierarch, which was reprinted, amazingly, in Lorwyn Eclipse Commander. For a single green, we get an 0/1 Goblin Shaman with Exalted. Exalted means whenever a creature we control attacks alone, that creature gets +1/+1 until end of turn. So not super relevant in this deck, but it can be great, and maybe we attack with Slimefoot and Squee so that we get an extra Saproling in play, and hopefully Slimefoot and Squee will be able to die from it, but now Slimefoot and Squee is a 4/4. Great. It maybe trades up with something that we didn't expect it to. In addition, the Hierarch can tap for 1 of any color in our commander's color identity. So this is, it doesn't say that, it taps for black, red, and green, but those are the colors in our commander's color identity. So yeah, Ignoble Hierarch is a 1 mana dork for us with a little Exalted ability and just a nice friend. Obviously, we're running Soul Ring. Costs 1, taps for 2. Yep, run Soul Ring in your decks, especially a deck that has such big creatures like ours. Wayfarer's Bauble is next. This is Rampant Growth on an artifact. It's like that Wayfarer's Bauble, it's like that Lander token we saw earlier from Glacial Godmaw. A single generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2, tap and sack it, we get to Rampant Growth. Find a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, shuffle. So Rampant Growth costs 2, so this costs 3 for us, but over the course of 2 turns, and we might as well run it because it puts something in our graveyard. It's an artifact that comes in, which triggers our Weftstalker Ardent, and yeah, it's another way for us to fix our mana. Arcane Signet is another kind of auto-include in a deck like this. For 2 generic mana, it's an artifact that taps for mana, so it is a 2-mana rock, a mana rock. It adds 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so in this deck, black, red, or green. Very good. We've seen Deadly Dispute, it makes a treasure, among other things. Farseek is next. It is 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us search our library for a plains, island, swamp, or mountain, so in this deck, just a swamp or a mountain card, put that on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. This is sort of like Rampant Growth. Oh, you don't know Rampant Growth? Well, Rampant Growth is right here. It's 1 and a green for a sorcery that lets us, Rampant Growth, search for a basic, put it on the battlefield tapped, and then shuffle. Of course we're running that. But why Farseek as well? Because Farseek can find things that lands that have the swamp or mountain type to them, which means we can find dual lands with Farseek. We have some lands that are dual typed swamps and forests, swamps and mountains, mountains and forests. So that lets us find something that, even though it's coming in tapped, just like any Rampant Growth, it gives us a way to cast green spells as well, a little better, because we've got green mana from those dual lands. Farseek is a better version of Rampant Growth in that way. And, amazingly, in these printings, costs a couple cents less. We're not running Nature's Lore, which you can find forests and put them into play untapped, because it's a few more dollars, but you sure could if you want to do a little bit of an upgrade. Wive of the Reliquary lets us find any land from our library and put it on the battlefield tapped, as long as we tap this and sack a creature. Druidic Satchel is next. This card is so cool. 3 generic mana for an artifact that if we pay 2 and tap it, we reveal the top card of our library. If it's a creature, we make a Saproling. If it's a land, we put that land onto the battlefield under our control. Does not say tapped. And if it's anything else, we get 2 life. So not very much control with this, but a lot of value. We care about Saprolings, we care about getting creatures into play. Seems very good. And 2 life isn't nothing. We see the big score. It can make 2 treasures, or it makes 2 treasures when we cast it. Brightcap Badger is next. This is an adventure creature. So it's 3 and a green for a 3/4 Badger Druid that says each fungus and Saproling we control taps for green. That's great for us. It gives us the ability to turn all of our Saprolings not just into little 1/1 friends, but into mana dorks. So that lets us accelerate. In addition, at the beginning of our end step, we make a Saproling. So this is another one of our creatures that just pumps out Saprolings. It's only at the beginning of our end step, and it's only our end step, not all of our opponents, but a free extra Saproling, don't mind if I do. However, it also has an adventure, which is Fungus Frolic, which is an instant for 2 and a green that makes 2 Saprolings. So the way this works is you can either, while this is in your hand, cast the Badger for 3 and a green, and you just get the Badger, and don't worry about the adventure. Or, while it's in your hand, you can cast the Adventure, and once you do, you exile this card, and you can play the Badger from exile. So you either get the Adventure and then the Badger on that same turn or not, or you just get the Badger. Once the Badger's in play, you cannot cast the Adventure. That's how it works. But if somehow the Badger gets into play and then dies, and then you're able to, maybe with Grave Venerations, regrow the Badger into your hand, you can then cast Fungus Frolic from your hand, make some more Saprolings, get your Badger out. Yeah, seems good. Next up is Pitiless Plunderer. 3 and a black for a 1/4 human pirate that says whenever another creature we control dies, make a treasure. That's awesome. Doesn't say non-creature, doesn't say tapped treasure token, just spit out treasures. The more creatures of ours that die, we want that to happen. We're going to get a lot of mana from this. The Sad Robot, Rampant Growth when it comes in. Zeatora makes 3 treasures when we fling something at our end step. Glacier Godmaw comes up with a lander token, so that's a free Wayfarer's Bauble for us. And Colossal Grave Reaper lets us put creatures directly from the graveyard into play, which is sort of like an acceleration effect. So yeah. Next up, we have our interactions section, which we've tagged as removal, just as again a shorthand. So Lightning Bolt is where we're starting. Lightning Bolt is, it's been here in the game since Alpha, and you should run it if you're running red. It's a single red for an instant that does 3 damage to any target. This kills a surprising number of creatures. It kills planeswalkers. It hits your opponents. Run this card. Artifact Mutation is next. This is a red and a green for an instant that says destroy target artifact. It can't be regenerated. And make a number of Saprolings equal to that artifact's mana value. Pretty great. A way to get Saprolings, way to blow up an artifact, sounds good. Instant speed. Bitter Triumph, as we've seen before, can kill creatures and planeswalkers. Hunter's Talent is a bite effect to kill creatures. Tear Asunder is 1 and a green for an instant with Kicker for 1 and a black. That means we can pay an additional 1 and a black, therefore paying 2 a black and a green for the spell if we want. If we don't kick it, this exiles a artifact or an enchantment, so it's already a better naturalize since it exiles. But if we do kick it, we do the same thing to any non-land permanent. As long as it's not a land, we exile it. Very powerful removal spell, totally flexible. Great. Braids makes our opponents have the choice of sacrificing something or giving us cards. It's not straight up removal, but it does get things off the board. Chomping Changeling is next. This is from Lorwyn Eclipsed. Look how cute this guy is. 2 and a green for a 1/2 shapeshifter with Changeling, meaning this card is every creature type. That's true in every zone. Is that relevant? Well, we'll see in a moment. It says when this creature enters, we destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. So this is the Reclamation Sage, 2 and a green for a creature that comes in and blows up an artifact or an enchantment. So why don't we just run Reclamation Sage? Well, Chomping Changeling has a better toughness, since the Rec Sage is a 1/1, but also, Chomping Changeling is a Saproling. So we can play this from our hand after a board wipe, with our commander in the graveyard. Maybe we decide to put our commander in the graveyard because we have this in hand, even though we've lost all of our Saprolings with the board wipe. We then play the Chomping Changeling, blow up an opponent's maybe Soul Ring, and then activate Slimefoot and Squee, sacrificing the Changeling, since it is a Saproling, to bring Slimefoot and Squee and something else back from the graveyard. So a little bit of interesting synergy there with this friend. Next up, we're running Putrefy. And obviously, Strixhaven Mystical Archive printings. Love these things. 1 a black and a green for an instant, destroy an artifact or creature, can't be regenerated. That's all it takes. Ravenous Chupacabra, as I mentioned before, is here. It's 2 and double black for a 2/2 Beast Horror. When it enters, we destroy a creature an opponent controls. Just, it's murder for 1 more mana that comes with a 2/2 body. Seems good. Reanimate this and blow something else up. Rise of the Witch King lets each player sacrifice a creature, and if we do, we can return a permanent from our graveyard to the battlefield. Great. Flare of the Hatebound cares about itself or other creatures coming back from the graveyard to the battlefield, and thereby burns things. We can hit any target with it. Kogla and Yadaro, when it enters, we can have it fight a creature, and when we cycle it, or channel it, whatever you want to think of it as, we destroy an artifact or enchantment. Trumpeting Carnosaur gives us the ability to discard it to do 3 damage to a creature or planeswalker. Zeatora can fling a creature, so that hits any target, so that's removal. Butcher of Malakir is Grave Pact, so everyone's sacrificing things when our creatures die. And Apex Allosaur fights everything. It's so mad, get out of its way. So those are our interaction spells. We are running 1 Wrath, as I mentioned. It is Massacre Worm. We've seen it, we love it. -2 to everything. Whenever our opponent's creatures die, their controller loses 2 life. Yeah, love the worm. We'll talk more about this other section soon. But for now, let's get into our other sections of our supplemental sections. Starting most of all with our payoffs. These are cards that trigger on death. Whenever we have one of our things die or something of our opponents die, these payoffs give us additional value. And I do want to call out a mention. We have plenty of other cards, like I said, in the considering section. It's worth checking out if you want to see more payoffs for a deck like this that has a lot of death in it. So Garna cares about our creatures dying, either letting us draw a card or doing a damage to each opponent. Grave Venerations drains each opponent for 1 whenever one of our creatures dies. Pitiless Plunderer gives us a treasure when our creatures die. High Society Hunter draws us a card when our creatures die. Sir Conrad deals a damage to each opponent when a lot of things happen, especially when our creatures die or go to our graveyard or leave our graveyard. Those are all the things. Flare of the Hatebound cares about our creatures re-entering, which is a payoff, not from things dying, I guess, technically, but from the thing that we're doing. Payoffs always just means cards that reward us for the thing we're going to do. So Flare of the Hatebound works that way. Vein Ripper rewards us when any creature dies by having an opponent lose 2 and we gain 2. And the Butcher of Malakir, of course, forces opponents to sacrifice a creature whenever one of our creatures dies. That's our payoff section. Let's talk about all the ways that we can make Saprolings. Saprolings Yeah, all of these cards make Saprolings or are a Saproling. So Artifact Mutation blows up an artifact, and we get a number of Saprolings equal to the artifact's mana value. Shopping Changeling also blows up an artifact or enchantment, and just is a Saproling. Druidic Satchel, if we reveal the top card of our library and it's a creature, we get a Saproling. Or we get to put a land on top into play, or we get 2 life. Brightcap Badger doesn't just have the Fungus Frolic Adventure that makes 2 Saprolings, but also makes a Saproling during each of our end steps, and makes all of our fungi and Saprolings tap for green. Namada produces Saprolings every time any of our opponent's creatures would die, and we exile them. Tendershoot Dryad gives us a Saproling at the start of each upkeep, and so does the Verdant Force. But the Dryad makes all of our Saprolings into 3/3s as long as we have the City's Blessing. So that's our Saproling section. What about other ways to recur our cards beyond just our commander? Well, as we've seen, Life from the Loam lets us put 3 lands from our graveyard, up to 3 lands from our graveyard, back into our hand, and we can put Life from the Loam itself back in our hand by dredging it. We haven't seen Eternal Witness yet. 1 and double green for a 2/1 human shaman. When it enters, we return target card from our graveyard to our hand. Straight up regrowth. Any card in our graveyard we can put back in our hand. It could be an instant or sorcery, or a land, or our commander if we really want to do it that way. Play the Eternal Witness after a board wipe. We don't have any Saprolings in play. Get Slimefoot and Squee back into our hand. Cast it again for 3. Sounds great. Yeah, and bringing the Eternal Witness back is with Slimefoot and Squee is sort of like activating Slimefoot and Squee and getting 4. It is getting 4 creatures into play. Slimefoot and Squee, the Eternal Witness, whatever the Witness brings back to our hand, which of course we'll cast as soon as we can, and the Saproling. So I guess that's 3 into play and 1 into our hand. Still pretty good. Victimize brings 2 of our creatures back from our graveyard to the battlefield at the cost of sacrificing 1 that's already in play. Grave Venerations lets us put creatures back from our graveyard into our hand if we're the monarch during our end step. And Rise of the Witch King lets us sacrifice a creature and forces each opponent to do so in order to put 1 of our permanents back from our graveyard onto the battlefield. That is our recursion section. We have a little bit of evasion in the form of Garruk's Uprising, which gives all of our creatures trample, and Hunter's Talent, which the second level of gives 1 of our attacking creatures +1/+0 and trample. A little bit of evasion, it's not bad. We also have a pump section, which just as small. Hunter's Talent, of course, it's the same thing, pumps 1 of our creatures up by 1. It's a little bit. Versus the Glacier Godmaw, which has landfall and gives all of our creatures +1/+1 and vigilance and haste until end of turn. So a little bit of pump there as well. And finally, as you saw a moment ago, we have this other 2-card token section. Remember, a bunch of 2-card sections, but we've got a lot of other options for those sections if you like them and want to go harder on them in our considering section at the bottom of the page. Idol of Oblivion cares about us making tokens, but it also can make a token if we want, this 10/10 Eldrazi. And Twilight Diviner can make token copies of our creatures when they come back from the graveyard. So yeah, that covers all of the spells in our library. As usual, we're going to talk about our land base now. So we're running 15 basics. We are mostly, here, I'll show it to you the other way. We are mostly a green deck, but we're pretty black as well. And we've got just a little bit more production for green than for black, just because we've got a little bit more green than black in our deck, but plenty for red. We're doing fine on this. So it ends up being that this is a good split. 3 mountains, 5 swamps, 7 forests. It's worth knowing what you have in your basics when you go searching for them, because we have a bunch of ways to rampant growth. So that's what we're looking at. And of course, these are March of the Machine arts. We're running all 3 bicycle lands for our colors. To demonstrate them, Canyon Slough is a land that enters tapped, but is a swamp and a mountain. It has these basic land types. So if we were going to Farseek, we could go find a swamp or a mountain and get the Canyon Slough and put it into play tapped. It comes in tapped anyway, so that's fine. And now we've got black or red rather than just black or red. I'm sorry, we can produce black and red rather than black or red. We also have the ability to cycle this if it's in our hand. So we pay 2, discard it, and draw a card. It's a good way to get a card into our graveyard that we can maybe get back with Life from the Loam or Rise of the Witch King, whatever we want. Don't really care that much about having cards in our graveyard, or land cards in our graveyard, but it's a possibility as well. So all of these bicycle lands work this way. They're typed duels that come in tapped, and we can cycle them for 2. Canyon Slough is red and black, Festering Thicket, green and black, and Sheltered Thicket, red and green. Next up, we're running all 3 check lands for our colors. Dragon Skull Summit is going to be our example. This is a land without basic types, but it does tap for black or red, and it enters tapped unless we control a swamp or a mountain. It does not say a basic swamp or basic mountain, which means we've got 15 cards in our deck that are basics, and 6 more cards that are typed duels, 3 of which are bicycle lands, and you'll soon see our Tango lands as well. Could upgrade these if you want, but with 21 cards in our library that count to bring these cards in untapped, we're pretty likely to be able to get them in untapped. However, if you wanted to upgrade these, you could upgrade them to slow lands, which come in untapped if you have at least 2 other lands of any type in play. But I think the check lands are very good options for us, and they're very inexpensive as well. As for upgrades for the bicycle lands, I think in this deck it would be a good idea to upgrade to Surveil lands. They also come in tapped, but they surveil when they enter, which is selection, and maybe puts cards in the graveyard for us rather than us having to have them in play or in our hand rather to cycle them. So might be a good option there. We're running these 5 fixing lands as well. Obviously, we're running Command Tower. It is sort of like Arcane Signet on a land. It's untapped. It taps for 1 mana of any color in our commander's color identity, so black, red, or green. Yeah, an untapped tri-land sounds great to me. Exotic Orchard is also an untapped land, but it makes 1 mana of any color that a land an opponent controls could produce. That means if our opponents are running any colors, then it just is an untapped land, and it taps for mana that we can pay into generic mana costs. It's pretty unlikely that our opponents are going to 100% be white, blue, or white and blue and nothing else. So we're probably going to be able to get this to come in as an untapped source of at least one of our colors, and maybe all 3. Maybe an opponent has a Chromatic Lantern in play, or they have their own Exotic Orchard. If they have a Chromatic Lantern, all their lands tap for anything, so we can tap for anything as well. If they have an Exotic Orchard of their own, that means their Exotic Orchard sees our lands, so our Exotic Orchard seeing theirs means our Exotic Orchard can produce mana that any of our lands can produce. Pretty sweet. We're running, I'll mention Path of Ancestry as well right here. This is a tap land with the same text as Command Tower, so it's a tapped tri-land. That's still pretty good. In addition, when we use its mana to cast a creature spell that shares a type with our commander, we scry 1. That's pretty good, even in a deck like this that only has 1 other creature that shares a type with our commander, which of course is Ignoble Hierarch. However, our commander shares types with itself. So if we use this as cast our commander, pretty great. Now that only works on casting the commander, not or casting a spell, not activating our commander's ability to bring it back from the graveyard. But the occasional scry, not bad, especially for a tri-land. Next we have Myriad Landscape. This is a land that comes in tapped and taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to search our library for up to 2 basic lands that share a land type, put them on the battlefield tapped, and shuffle. So this is very slow. It comes in tapped, we have to pay mana into it and sacrifice it, and the lands we get come in tapped themselves. However, it is 1 land drop that's turning into 2, so it's technically ramp in our land base. This is a kind of acceleration that I like to use generally. If you wanted to switch to something else, you could do Blighted Woodland. Blighted Woodland is basically the same with a couple of changes. It does not come in tapped. It taps for colorless. It costs 3 and a green and tap and sack it to find 2 basics, but they don't have to be the same type. They come in tapped and then we shuffle. So that's a little slower, in fact, because you have to wait a couple more turns, but it does come in untapped, so you can tap it right away. So, your choice either way there. Finally, it's Temple of the False God. I know some people don't like this land, but I think it's great for the power level of decks that I build. So I guess I should get rid of this. Temple of the False God comes in untapped and taps for 2 colorless mana, like Soul Ring. It's a soul land. We just can't activate it at all unless there are at least 4 other lands in play. It needs us to have 5, including itself. So if your opening hand is a mountain and a Temple of the False God and no other lands, probably you want to mulligan. Usually this deck is very forgiving of mulligans, and it's got a lot of acceleration. So Temple of the False God on turn 4 or 5 is usually going to have it turn on. And once it is, we've got the ability to cast our big spells one turn earlier than we otherwise would, since it does produce 2 mana on a single land drop. Pretty nice. Next up, we are running all 3 Pain lands on our colors. We'll use Karplusan Forest as the example. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or it taps for red or green if we let it deal a damage to us. We are in Jund, we do not care about taking damage, we will kill them first. But the way this plays out, it's worth it to take 1 damage just to fix our mana. Usually we're just going to tap this for colorless if we don't need the pips. And if we do need red or green for definite in that moment, then it's the difference between us being able to cast a spell and not. So that's 1 extra damage that's worth taking. That's how these play out. The Karplusan Forest is red and green, Llanowar Wastes is black and green, and Sulphur Springs is red or black. I don't know what I'm pausing for. Also, all of these take place on Dominaria, especially this Phil Foglio referenced art here. Love it. Yeah, if you wanted to upgrade these, you could probably go into Shocklands. They may not do any damage to you at all, and they're dual typed. But even if you're willing to take the shock when they come in, that's probably worth it for you for the same sort of philosophy behind the Pain lands damage themselves. We're running all 3 Tango lands. I mentioned these a little bit above. These are dual typed lands that come in tapped unless we control 2 or more basic lands. So we only have 15 basics in our library. So this may come in tapped, and if it does, that's okay. We could upgrade these to shock lands if we want to, but there's a lot of options for us to get those basics into play in other ways, like our just straight up rampant growth effects. So Cinderglade might be coming in untapped for us, which is a pretty sweet deal for a dual land. Cinderglade, of course, is a mountain forest, so it's red or green producing. Smoldering Marsh makes black or red, and Vernal Fen makes red or green. I'm glad that they're finishing out these cycles. And this is the Lorwyn Eclipse printing, but they of course printed this in the Edge of Eternity's decks as well. And I think we're getting the remainder of these Bicycle and Tango lands in their cycle when Secrets of Strixhaven comes out in a couple of months, so watch for that. We're running Savage Lands. It's a tap land that taps for all of our colors, so it is worse than Path of Ancestry, which is a worse version of our Command Tower, but still, all of our colors at the price of coming in tapped. Sounds good to me. Finally, we have these 5 utility lands. So I like to run Demolition Field in most of my decks. This is an answer to a non-basic land. Most of the kind of decks that I build are for pods where any kind of land denial is frowned upon, but you have to have one answer. Just having one answer is not asking too much for your Voltron opponent who's running a Rogue's Passage, and so therefore their big commander is unblockable, or your control opponent who's running a Glacial Chasm and you can't do any damage to them. Any non-basic that is significantly upgrading an opponent's game plan or that is harming our ability to do our game plan is fair game. So having a single answer to it is not so bad. Demolition Field is that. It's an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, tap, and sack it to destroy a non-basic land that an opponent controls. And then that opponent gets to search for a basic and put it on the battlefield untapped. And so do we. So neither we nor they are down a land, assuming we have basics left in our library, which we will, and we have access to our mana right away since those basics come in untapped, but we've removed something that was a threat for us, or an enabler for threats, or a big answer to our own threats. And that's fair to do. Grim Backwoods is next. This is a untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can pay 2, a black and a green, and tap it, and sack a creature to draw a card. That's 5 mana, so 4 here plus the Backwoods itself, and sacking a creature to get card draw. But if we're desperate for cards, this is a good way to do it. More importantly though, this is a sack outlet in our land base, so it increases the number of outlets that we're running otherwise. Similarly, we have High Market, and I've just chosen to use the Stellar Sights printing for this because it's just so cool, but there's plenty of other High Markets out there you could get. This is an untapped land that taps for colorless, or we can just tap it and sack a creature, and all we gain is a life. but without having to pay anything into it, it's a repeatable sack outlet in our land base. Very useful for those purposes. We're running Rogue's Passage ourselves because we do have a bunch of big creatures, and after the game has gone on long enough, we can sure need to close things out and have a big enough creature to do it if only we're not blocked. So Rogue's Passage is an untapped land. It taps for colorless, or we can pay 4 and tap it to make a creature unblockable this turn. We generally are going to use this on our creatures, but we could use this politically, as often I have said. Maybe an opponent A is able to kill opponent B or do a lot of damage to them, if not for opponent B's blockers. So we say to opponent A, hey look, if you attack your opponent B, I will make one of your creatures of your choice unblockable, as long as you leave me alone for a turn cycle or 2. And they go, great, go ahead and activate it. And we say, no. You have to attack first, because if we activate Rogue's Passage before you attack, you could declare that creature attacking us, and it would still be unblockable. And they would say, okay, that's fair, I'll trust you. I declare attacks with this creature against opponent B. And we'll say, great, before blockers, we activate Rogue's Passage. Your creature's unblocked, remember our deal, and they'll say, no problem, because everyone's always honest at a commander table. But yeah, Rogue's Passage is great for us and good for other ways too. We're also running Susur Secundi, Void Altar. This is from Edge of Eternities. It is a planet land that enters tapped and taps for black. And it has the Station ability. Station means at sorcery speed, we can tap a creature to put a number of charge counters on Susur Secundi equal to the power of that creature we tapped. Once it has 12 or more charge counters on it, it gains this ability. For us to pay 1 and a black, tap it, and pay 2 life, and sacrifice a creature to draw cards equal to the sacrificed creature's power, but only at sorcery speed. So this is a lot of investment for an okay payoff, pretty good payoff, especially for our really big creatures, but it takes us a while to get to it. However, a lot of the time, we're not going to be attacking with a bunch of our little Saprolings, so if we don't need them as chump blockers, we can just incrementally get Susur Secundi to have plenty of charge counters over the course of a few turns, and eventually it's online. This is a $5 card. You could easily swap it out for something else, but I thought it was pretty cool, and it plays well in our deck with our big creatures that we can sacrifice, draw a bunch of cards, then use Slimefoot and Squee to reanimate them, and we've still got all those cards. So yeah. And that about sums it up. Again, I'm making a deck for each of the Mark to the Machine legends. I have covered all of them, from the main set, from the special pre-release promos like Slimefoot and Squee, and from the Jumpstart, the 2 Jumpstart cards. So now all I have left to do are the ones from the Commander product. So I guess I'm going to do those next. So since I'm making a deck for all of those, let me know in the comments which one you'd like to see me do first, if you have an interest. Otherwise, you're going to see them eventually. So yeah, thanks for watching, everyone. Make sure to like and subscribe. Ring the bell if you want to be notified whenever I post one of my videos. And remember most of all that magic is fun. You should play more Magic.